During this joint committee meeting, many of us expressed both support and opposition to decrease any further the fuel energy tax in this year's budget, considering all the extraordinary unknowns and the inflexibility that exists within the budget, and recognize that, for example, we were not able to fully fund the school system's request, nor can we fully, for example, fund the Montgomery College's request, and those are just two particular items that stand out, but obviously recognizing that other than that, our fiscal policy calls for remembering that we need to stay the course when it comes to issues like reserves, et cetera.
Let me just also be very clear about what this is right now in the framework. We can speculate about what you can do for reducing energy and how much you might pay in bills. The reality is this: we're talking about a flat number right now. If we didn't do anything, you'd have the same expenses you had last year, unless you increased your energy consumption. And so that's something that's within your control. So we're not talking about an increase. We're talking about reducing the tax liability or tax burden. And at a time when we're holding a lot of departments flat, to ask for a reduction is a little bit of a stretch for something to ask for. Right? We have a lot of different departments that would love to have reductions in terms of their expenses, to have increases in terms of the things that they could do, but we're telling them no. And so in that same framework, that's where this discussion lies. And let me give you just a very, very quick example. So if Giant Food all of a sudden has an increase in the cost of oranges, well, they still have to sell oranges. They're not going to stop selling oranges. They pass along their costs to the consumer. Many of the things that we've heard from either our AOBA partners or others, we pass those costs along. Okay, so, Giant's now adjusted the price of the oranges, and now it's more expensive for the consumers. So Giant has passed along the costs and absorbed that. All of a sudden, a wholesaler contacts Giant and says, you know what, we're going to reduce the cost of your oranges by 10 cents a pound. And Giant says, great. That's fantastic. But we're already charging people $2 a pound. Am I going to all of a sudden reduce it to $1.90 a pound and tell all of my consumers, hey, you've got a deal. Now I'm going to reduce it to $1.90 a pound. Well, maybe if the competitors do, but if the competitors don't, and it's really a competitive-driven market, you don't do that. So you're not passing along the savings. You're pocketing that money, and that's money that you're getting in your bottom line. But the reality is, at the end of the day, it's still $2. And you've already worked that into your budget. You're not doing your budgets based on what it was back in 2010. You're doing your budgets based on what happened last year. And I talked to MetaMune. It was interesting. They said they do theirs 2 years. And I said, okay, so 2 years, you have a 2-year reduction. From what you had 2 years ago, you've actually reduced the cost of your energy tax. So it's actually been a plus. If it's important enough, I should be hearing about it all the time. And if it's so great in terms of our reduction, I should be hearing about that too, and how much it matters and how much the cost is being passed along to those beneficiaries, whether they're customers or consumers. I haven't heard once in AOBA's testimony that they said, oh, well, we're going to reduce rents because now we're going to have reduced energy costs. Those things are fair questions and fair conversations in the context of what I said is a much larger conversation, a comprehensive conversation about energy tax policy. So I don't want to have just one narrow conversation about one piece of something when it does not translate to all of the other things that are out there. All of the other costs of doing business, whether it's permitting fees, all the other things, we have to look at this in a much larger context about business climate. And I think that this council up here has been very open and supportive of that. And so it's frustrating for me, and I said this before and I'll say it again, to have this conversation on the dais a couple days before we're about to finalize a budget. That is not what I want. My door is always open. I know I've met with my Chamber of Commerce many, many times before. We've had these conversations. She has certainly espoused her concerns about the energy tax, so I will give her credit for that. However, when it comes to the global context of things, I can tell you right now, I just don't see it.
It is in order for a substitute amendment to be offered. That motion is now before the council. Those in favor of the substitute, which would be placing a 5% reduction in the increase, the 2011 increase in the energy tax, will signify by raising their hands. Those in favor will signify by raising their hands. And that is Mr. Berliner, Mr. Katz, Ms. Florine, and the council president. Those opposed? Mr. Elrich, Mr. Hucker, Mr. Rice, Mr. Reamer, and Ms. Navarro. Okay, so that substitute is defeated. Is there another motion to come before the council? The substitute is defeated, so that would take us to the underlying motion. That's right, thank you. So, so the motion before the council now is Mr. Reamer's motion to concur with the county executive's recommendation on the rate of the energy tax. Those in favor of Mr. Reamer's motion will signify by raising their hands. And that is Mr. Elrich, Mr. Hucker, Mr. Rice, Mr. Reamer, and Ms. Navarro. Those opposed are Mr. Katz, Ms. Florine, Mr. Berliner, and the council president. All right then, so the position of the council is that the energy tax will remain at the rate it was in FY15 for FY16. I thank my colleagues for working through this matter.